Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books, what a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together, what a yummy snack. PBJamz, yummy books and music. PBJamz, reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz.
Good morning, good afternoon, evening, whenever it is that you are here with us for PBJamz. We're very thankful that you chose to take some time out of your day and spend it with us. And I am thrilled. I'm really, really thrilled to be here with Christy Mihaly because she has written this beautiful, beautiful book. I don't know if you can see it up here behind me, but it is called Music and Silence. And so, Christy and Jen Jasinski, who is also on, I think Jen's is coming up first, so we've probably already done Jen's by now, but the three of us all have like string related books coming out within just a month of each other, and so it's super exciting. Christy and I have an event coming up in Vermont that we're going to do together, which is where Christy lives. And so I'm going to be traveling up there, and she and Jen and I are working out some fun things. So I am especially happy to have made a new friend and co-author in Jen and in Christy. So Christy, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the chance to chat.
Yeah, such a beautiful book. So I did get a copy in the mail a while back from Erdman's, who published this book, and I first off was just so struck by the beautiful art,
Yes,
and it's just fabulous. Can we do a shout out for your illustrator?
absolutely. I think that I'm just so thrilled with the art that she brought to this story. Her name is Mariona Cabasa, and I actually really lobbied my publisher to hire Mariona to do the art, and that is because two reasons. Mariona did the art for a prior book of mine with a different publisher. It's called Water, Barefoot Books Water. And it's a oversized, gorgeously illustrated, sort of encyclopedia kind of book about water, the water cycle, the importance of water in the world. And Mariona, I had never heard of her before, and she came in to illustrate the book. And I was just blown away by the beauty of the art that she brought. I also learned at that time that she was from Catalonia. So when it was time for us to find an artist to illustrate this book about Pablo Casals, I felt strongly that if we could find an artist from Catalonia, which is where Pablo Casals is from, it would really be so much stronger. Casals carried this identity as a man from Catalonia so strongly as part of who he was and what he did in life. And I know that he's a hero in that area of Spain, and I really wanted to have that sort of shown in the art. So when Mariona agreed to do it, I was really excited. And then, as you can see if you look at the book, she really brings her heart and soul into the pictures that she provided for this story.
Yeah, they're so lovely, absolutely beautiful. And when Jen and I just did our interview a few days ago, and we were talking about the similarities between our three books, and so obviously they're all string books, which is what brought us together, but then when we
Right.
start looking at them more closely, like there's all these other little connections, and the birds are just so, there's so many birds in this. She's done so much art with the birds, and of course my book has a bird theme running throughout it as
Yes.
well, and Jen's
Yes.
book also has birds, and I was like,
Yes.
and they're so beautiful. And so it was just kind of a very serendipitous little bit, but the birds, just all the illustrations are just absolutely spectacular in this book. Let's talk for a second about how you came to this book. So we were just talking before we got official that this book has had quite a long journey, that you started writing it quite some years ago. So talk to us about how that all started and anything you want to tell us about that long, arduous journey that it's been
Sure.
on.
Sure. Um, yes, sometimes books, especially picture books, take much longer than you think they're going to from start to finish. This one is a story that I started writing. uh, I had been thinking about it before then, but I started writing it in 2014. So it's that would be 12 years ago.
Wow.
And that does happen. So it was one of the earliest picture books that I wrote, and that's one reason why it took a long time because I wasn't very good in the beginning, right? So I started writing for kids in 2011. And I was writing magazine pieces and stories for magazines, and I was feeling like this is really fun, and I'm getting better at this. I started taking courses and going to workshops, and then I realized maybe I should try books. I did some educational books, and then I sat down to think about writing picture books. Um, and this is one of the first stories that I wanted to write. I had been playing cello for a few years. I was a person who was an adult learner. I knew who Pablo Casals was. In 2011 and 12, my family got the chance to live in Spain for a year. My husband got a sabbatical, and so we lived in Spain. My daughter went to Spanish school. And we really dug into being in the Spanish culture. And I learned more about what it was like to live there during the Spanish Civil War. That was a big piece of history that's still alive there. And I also learned more about Pablo Casals. I, of course, knew who he was because I was a cello player, and all the cello players know who Pablo Casals is. But we went to Barcelona and we learned more about all that he had done there. And we went to the Pablo Casals Museum, which is the beach house that he had south of Barcelona on the coast. And there were gorgeous displays of things from his life, his one of his old cellos. And then they had videos going of his speeches at the United Nations. And I saw what he was doing as an old man. He was like 96 probably the last time he spoke at the UN, and he talked about peace, and he talked about how he still believed in peace and the work of the United Nations to bring countries together. And he played the cello, and it was just mesmerizing. And I just felt so charmed and inspired. And also, I wondered, why don't people know more about him? I think kids in the United States should know about Pablo Casals. Maybe someday I could write a book about him. So it went from there. Um, so I spent a couple years, refining that first draft, 2014 to 2016. Um, it was pretty good at the end of that time, I thought. And it was good enough that when I submitted it to a literary agent, Erji Diak, she liked it and she took me on as a client.
Oh, wow.
Um, and then she submitted it and no one else liked it.
That
So that
happens.
happens too, right?
Yes, it
So
does.
now it's 2016, 2017, and politics are changing. And we sat down and thought, maybe we could bring out his anti-fascism work a little more, and, just try a rewrite or two. So I really, at that point, tried a lot of approaches. I wrote a version in which the cello narrates the story.
Right.
I wrote a version in which it was sort of poetry, little poetic vignettes throughout his life. I mean, none of these really worked, but each one sort of informed the next draft. And then of course it's like, but he had a whole long life, and what do you take out of it, which is always a question in a picture book biography. I ended up lopping off the last 25 years of the man's life because there was a real story arc, and I was ending on a really triumphant moment, and
Yeah.
I kind of liked the way that felt.
Mhm.
And I ended up with a publisher who was willing to give this book the space it needed and include a lot of back matter, in which I got to tell the whole rest of his story, and some additional information as well, which I really appreciated. So it was 2018. We went out on submission again, got about a half dozen more rejections, and then Erdman's made an offer. So that was 2018. 2019, we signed a contract. And then in 2020, we had COVID.
Yes, we did.
So that slowed things down a bit. But I think it was the 22 and 23, we revised. And the revision process can go quickly or it can go slowly, and partly it depends on how busy your editor
For
is.
sure.
But also, I really love the editing process, and I love the improvements that you can see when someone who really loves the work as much as you do, looks at it with fresh eyes and new ideas. And we did have to cut. We had to cut some words, which is part of the process often.
Yeah.
It was 2024 when we got the artist on board. Mariona came on and started working her magic. And here we are in 26. So yeah, yeah. It felt sometimes like it would never happen. But it also, I love this story enough that I never lost interest in it. Which
Yeah.
is kind of what you look for when you write a book like this,
Right.
because it's going to be with you and you're going to be with it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for a very long time. Because you go
Yeah.
through the whole publishing process, which is, as you said, very daunting and sometimes very lengthy. But then you're going to be promoting this book for, years to come as well.
Oh,
So yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
very long haul with this book. So you need to love it, for
Exactly.
sure. So it's good that you
Exactly.
do. Good that you're passionate about it. So I have to say, as a reader, in the first place, yes, let's talk about the back matter for a second because, oh my word, it is so comprehensive. Like it is a beautiful stretch of back matter. I don't. I mean, there are some books who do have a really nice chunk of back matter, but this is definitely one of the nicer sections of back matter that I have seen. So, yes, kudos to Erdman's for including all that. I think it definitely informs, just more knowledge, and I think for kids and adults, and I think your book is like mine in that I think these books are just as applicable and just as lovely and beautiful and informative for adults as they are for children.
Yes, and I love that about your book also, although the language is very poetic and lyrical, and kids can, go right along with it. It's such a fun concept for adults, who may not have heard about this event in Barcelona, and it's really a lovely, lovely story. And again, the back matter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the back matter is definitely what makes it so beautiful for adults as well. But I have to say, as a reader, as an adult reader, encountering your book for the first time and having just been to Spain over the summer, because, my husband and I did this big European tour because we did go to Barcelona because that's where my book happened. So we
Hmm.
did, Madrid. We went and interviewed Eugenio, and we went to Barcelona. And I don't want to belabor all that, but what I do want to say is we were in Barcelona, and I was very unaware until I got there that they don't speak
Ah.
traditional Spanish
Hmm.
typically in Barcelona. I'm thinking I'm in Spain. I get there and I realize I'm not really in Spain. I really am in Catalonia. And I knew nothing of the history. And so for me, I mean, I told my husband, I read it to him after it came in that night, and I was reading through it. And I was going, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. But even more than that, like, I get it now. I understand. Yeah, I
Yeah,
understand why they're holding on to their
right.
language and their culture, so much more now. I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I'd had this book before.
Mm,
But it was very, very just informative and endearing in that way to say, okay, I understand better now. And so, yes, I will just say again, I think, and I have a T-shirt that I wear that says picture books are good for everyone.
uh-huh.
And I
Right,
believe that with all of my heart. And I think
right.
that your book is a beautiful example of, is it for kids? Yes, of course it's for kids. The art is beautiful. There's beautiful language. There's a great story. It's great for kids. Kids are going to enjoy it. But is it also great for older kids? Yes, absolutely. Are there layers that the even older kids and the adults are going to get and enjoy? Yes. And that makes it just all the more amazing book. You have some beautiful picture books, but they're strictly for kids. That's not to say that the parents are not going to enjoy sharing them with their kids, but they're not going to take the same thing from those picture books that they're going to take from yours, and hopefully yes, from mine. So I do think there's a level of picture book that is definitely not just for kids.
hmm And I think the nonfiction ones are often in that category because there's so much that you can write about that is of interest to children.
Hmm.
And I have adults for my other picture books. I wrote three of them on topics relating to civics, but also the water book. Adults will say to me, I just learned a lot reading your book.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. I mean, the idea is you're conveying information that's important for everybody to know, and you're doing it in a way that kids can appreciate. So, um, picture books are amazing.
They are. They really, really are. The marriage of just the lyrics and the text and the art. I mean, just it's all just so beautiful. And this is a beautiful example of that. So we've definitely skirted around a bit of the music that's in your book. Can we dig into that a little more deeply? So you mentioned that you are a cello player. So talk to us about the music and where it shows up in this book. And
Sure. Well, first of all, I would call myself a cello student. And as I have told other people, when you start, as an adult, you're never going to be the brilliant player that you may have been if you had started when you were 4. But it's such a beautiful instrument, and it really has brought me a lot of pleasure, especially playing with other people. And as you play the cello suites by Bach are like the sort of go-to that everyone wants to learn to play and everyone loves to listen to, Bach's suites for cello solo. And they are woven into the story of Pablo Casals. And I had several versions of this draft where people said, "Oh, you got to take stuff out." So I took out the part about him discovering the cello suites. And then I said, I cannot take that out. That has to go back in. I had read before I went to Spain, I had read an amazing book for adults, written by Eric Siblin, and it's called The Cello Suites, J.S. Bach, Pablo Casals, and the Search for a Baroque Masterpiece. And it weaves together the stories of Bach and Casals and the Bach cello suites. And it was kind of a wonderful treatment of, these three amazing elements of music. So this is a book about music. It's about a little boy who's very musical to begin with. He describes his childhood as being surrounded, swimming in music, and he had a musical father who taught him to play the violin as a young kid. But then he had this moment when he heard the cello played for the first time, and at that time he's 11 years old, and he's like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life.
yeah.
And his father was like, cello. Well, and at the time, interestingly, cello was not considered a solo instrument. It was sort of relegated to the background, and um, it was kind of a weird choice. and his father couldn't teach him on the cello. So his mother was convinced that he knew what he wanted and he was going to be great at the cello. So eventually they packed up and he and his mom moved to Barcelona, where he was going to, from their little tiny village in the south, where he was going to learn the cello. And he immediately is outstanding. And he knows what he wants and he knows the sound he wants to get that cello to make. And he tells his teacher that the way that he's teaching him is not right. And he's going to play his own way because he wants it to sound a certain way. It was so interesting to me. They used to teach cello students to play with their arms just held right next to their
Yeah.
sides, down
Yeah.
to the elbows, like hold a book under your arm as you played. And Casals just said, this does not work. This does not work. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so eventually his teacher just gave up trying to change him because in fact he was a really good player.
Right.
So
If
that
it's not
was,
Baroque, don't fix it.
yeah, there you go. Very funny. Um, but then when he was, I think, 12 years old, or 13 maybe, he and his father came and visited in Barcelona frequently, and they would go on walks. And his father liked to go to the music stores or and look for more music for his son to play. And they were rifling through a box of used music and came across this yellowed old manuscript that was the Bach suites for solo cello. And his father had never heard of these, and Pablo Casals had never heard of these. And he took them home and he was so thrilled. And he, in that sense, discovered them,
Oh,
brought them out of obscurity. I mean, a few people knew about them, but they were considered like student exercises. They,
right,
they were
right, right.
nothing to perform.
Yeah.
He spent 12 years of his life honing those, like just playing them for himself and practicing. And each one of them is very intricate and very complex. You know Bach.
Yeah.
And gorgeous, gorgeous. And each one is different. They have different moods. They have different difficulties. And he spent all those years just practicing them until he finally decided in his 20s, I can play these in public now. And he brought them to the public, and the public loved them.
Right.
And he became intimately associated with the Bach cello suites. So, I mean, that's kind of a fun part of Casal's story. But it wasn't, he also played he played all the greats. The other piece there are two other pieces that are strongly associated with him that are in the book. One is Ode to Joy, which was such a public celebration, which he led his own orchestra in playing, um, because Pablo Casals was a very political creature as well, and he was very much a advocate for the Spanish Republic against the fascists who came in. And when the Republic, when the people had a big election and voted in a new democracy, Pablo Casals and his orchestra played this public performance of Ode to Joy. And then when the Franco and his forces came in and started their coup and started bombing, Casals got the word that that was happening as he was in the middle of rehearsing with his orchestra Ode to Joy. And he said to his orchestra, okay, well, let's play this one more time before we go off and do what needs to be done. And so he conducted Ode to Joy for this final time, tears in his eyes, because this music is just so moving and so powerful, and it was happening at this point in history when things were going to get really dark. So yeah, music, and then silence. What Casals does after the war to bring attention to the fact that, hey, you guys, defeated all the fascists and the Nazis. And what is going on? Why are you letting Franco still be the ruler of Spain? Why won't you finish what you started and defeat fascism in Spain and let democracy bloom again in Spain? But understandably, the nations that had just survived World War II and were all rebuilding didn't have a lot of appetite to go into Spain and start beating up on Franco. So what was Pablo going to do? And he felt he was such a man of principle. He just couldn't stand it. And he just couldn't perform in any country that was so willing to go along with Franco and acknowledge Franco as the legitimate ruler of Spain. So he just said, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play anywhere that recognizes Franco. And then that turned into I'm just not going to play until the world acknowledges that they got to go, that this isn't okay. And I want to bring attention to the cause of the Spanish people and the plight of the many refugees. I want people to pay attention. And he did that through his silence. The reason it was powerful was because he was so renowned. He was so
Mhm.
beloved. He was such a, giant of the music world at that time. And so he said, my only weapon is my cello, my baton, and I this is all I can do.
Mhm.
And so that was pretty powerful too.
Yeah. I mean, very powerful in the fact that, you have this person who believes so strongly that they're really willing to set aside their fame, their fortune, their livelihood, really. I mean, this is part and parcel of who he was,
Exactly.
this musician.
Exactly.
And so basically he's saying, I'm going to sacrifice everything I am and everything I believe in because I believe in this more.
He said this is the greatest sacrifice any artist could ever be asked to make. And he made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think anybody who has music in their soul, like, I mean, there are people who just listen to music and if it's there, but for anybody who like has felt the power of music to move and to change, like to willingly give that up, I mean, is huge. Much less someone who has dedicated all these years of his life to becoming such a, an acclaimed and accomplished musician, and then just to set that aside as a principle to say this is not okay and I'm not gonna participate in that. So yeah, very powerful, very powerful. Love the title because it gets at that. Like the music was powerful, but the silence was equally powerful, and the two of those together, came together to help change things for the better. And I think that's such a powerful. And I'm stepping on. Anyway, let me just hush because sometimes I do this. I get excited. So, I don't want to take your
Well, this is what
message
I hope
away. That
everyone
might be it.
I hope everyone has the same, like, I want to talk about this, and this
I
is
know,
really cool.
right? I don't want
Yeah.
to step on what you want to say about it though, because I do want to ask. So, what is one thing that you hope that people for sure get from this book, that they take it, that they don't miss it? Like maybe it's something even small that they could miss, but you really hope they don't.
Well, the power of music obviously is the big overarching thing. But what I hope people notice, and I would invite people to look carefully, is the art. And what Mariona does with the birds and the bombs. I mean, it's just transcendent. And so I would invite people to really and kids, and let your kids just sit and stare at the page for a long time. Don't be in a hurry, even though the words are so exciting, to turn the page.
Mhm.
Look at what Mariona did. There's a page where she has a very stylized map of Europe.
Mhm.
This is my fold and gather, so it's a little bit falling apart. with Spain just filled in black, and
Mm-hmm.
all of the rest of Europe filled with the glowing colors that Mariona does so well, and these birds coming out of it. And then the ones where she's got the birds coming from the music and the bombs and the blackness falling from the sky is really oh, and it's on the cover too. Yeah, so that's like she's doing some powerful stuff there with the art. So this is a picture book, and one of the, thrills of doing a picture book is that the artist brings so much to it. And so I would invite people to really sit with the art as much as the story and the words.
So something that we do as teachers, I'm guessing teachers still do it because I haven't been in the regular classroom in a while, but we would often take a book and we would do what we call a picture walk, and we would walk through and not even read the story, first. We would do just a picture walk and make some predictions. And what do you think is happening here? And why do you think this is black and everything else are these beautiful colors? Why would an artist choose to do that? And walking through that art to begin with and really soaking that in before you know the story. And I think this book in particular might be a really good book for teachers to do that, or families or parents or whoever's reading this book with a child, is to sit with that art and say, let's look at the art first. What do you think is happening here? And why do you think? Let's just pay attention to that. And then I think when you go back to the story, like you already have some investment in that story, you already have kind of some ideas, that some predictions that you've made. And I think it really brings kids into, and I think especially for a story like this that is a little bit longer maybe than some of the stories that
Mhm.
kids, like we've been really pushing the barriers of, like let's make them 500 words or less, because their attention spans. So this one is a little bit longer than that.
Mhm.
So I think that's another reason why doing that picture walk first and getting them invested in the story and invested in the art, that's then going to lead them, like the art's kind of going to hold their hand and walk them through the story.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, from a teacherly perspective, like that's definitely what I would do with this book. Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
so much, so cool. Well, that kind of brings us up to the last question. But before I get to that last question, which is just going to give you a chance to tell us what else is happening in all things Christy and what's coming. But before we get to that, is there anything else that maybe I didn't ask, or something else that you have thought of that you really would like to share before we get to that last one?
Well, you ask good questions, and I think I've talked. I mean, as much as I love to talk about this book, I think I've said the things I wanted to say. One more little piece. If you are looking at the words, I did try to use musical words in the story, and so crescendo and little words like that that have a musical meaning to them. I did try to sprinkle them through, and I think that's also the way that Pablo Casal's thought in musical
Right.
terms.
That
Yeah,
makes sense because I think,
yeah,
yeah, for someone who that was such an important part of his life, I would imagine, yeah, that he
right.
probably thought a lot in music and in
Yeah,
musical terms.
yeah.
Very cool. Such a beautiful story. So yeah, that does bring us up to the very last thing, and that is I would just love for you to share with our watchers, listeners, viewers, what is happening in your world, where they might can see you, or what else you have coming down the pipeline, or whatever you would like for us to know about what's coming.
Well, thank you so much. I have been really focused on getting this book out into the world. I do have a couple of bookstore events coming up in Vermont, and I'm excited about those and hoping to get to some conferences with it, and maybe some book festivals, going into some schools. Um, I also have another book that's coming out in May, so it's a bit of a busy period for me right now. And that book is quite different. It's about American history, and it was put together with the thought of America's 250th anniversary in mind. And it's called America's Founding Myths and What Really Happened. And that one is brightly illustrated and humorous, and also um, on the theme of telling the truth and correcting wrongs, and making a little bit of an effort to correct some of the misunderstandings that people have about the beginnings of the United States. So that comes out in May, and I'll be doing another round of all the things with that one, and possibly be able to combine some events because, as I said, there are some similar themes about speaking your mind and exercising your rights and that kind of thing. So,
Well,
yeah.
and love of country too, like
Yeah,
just that
absolutely.
patriotism, like two different countries, but that patriotism. Yeah,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, so you guys know I'm going to link all of that up below. I'm going to link up all Christy's information, her website. The Usually I link to the Goodreads page because that'll show you all the places where you can buy her book. So just check that out below, and also she's going to share some of her best writing tips for you and with you. And I'm going to share some writing prompts, some teaching tips for the regular classroom and families, and daycares, and all of that. Anybody who's teaching anybody anything. And then also in the music classroom, some special things that you might could pick up on. So, and there'll be, of course, a YouTube playlist and a Pinterest board with all the more ideas. So you can use this episode as a little mini teaching guide, and you can do all kinds of amazing things with Christy's beautiful book called Music and Silence. And I hope that you will definitely check it out from your library. As a matter of fact, request it at your library if it's not there. Like, that's a great way to help our authors out, is requesting their books at the library. Again, you know, I often talk about how PBJamz books are the great books for your music teachers. We're coming up, well, in fact, right now, as we record, we're in Music in Our Schools month, right? By the time this airs, that will have passed, but we'll be getting ready to celebrate Teacher Appreciation at the beginning of May. And so I hope that you will, buy this book for your music teachers and your family, your kids' music teachers, or your private music teachers. Reviews really help our authors out, so be sure to do that. There's 3 great places: Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, and Amazon. So if you could do that for Christy with this book or any of her books that you have read and enjoyed, including the one that's coming in May. So she has another opportunity for you there. So check those out. All the things are going to be linked up below. Check all of that out. Leave us a comment, because if you do that before the next episode airs, the deadline will be in the post. If you do that, then you'll be entered to win a copy of this beautiful book that you'll have for your very own to keep forever and always, as I tell my students. Is this mine to keep? Yes, you can keep it forever and always.
All
So be
right.
sure to check all that out. Leave us a comment. Let us know how you enjoyed the episode.
And if you want to see Tawny and me together in person, if you happen to be in Waitsfield, Vermont on August 1st, we will be there at
We
Inkling
will.
Children's Books. Yeah.
Together, live and in person at Inkling's Children's Books. So excited to get to do that with you. Looking forward to, getting to meet you live and in person and talking about both of our beautiful books and sharing them with kids. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you.
For me, too. Thank you so much for being here, Christy. And thank you guys for being here, too. And we hope you'll come back and join us for the next episode of PB Jams. Bye.
PBJamz, what a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz, songish books and bookish songs, tips for music teachers, interviews and book